This is crazy in the most amazing way. Welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Kat. If you are new here, I make a ton of lifestyle, home, routine, life cleaning, motivating, that kind of thing, and now mom life videos. It has been a little bit since I posted. I think my last video was in like March or April or something, and it was a morning routine, my pregnant morning routine, and it is just mind-blowing to now be back with my son sitting here next to me. And I thought the perfect video back for today's video, I wanted to share my birth story with you. I know before I gave birth, I watched so many of these videos, and I am so grateful to say, and I do not take this for granted, that my birth story, it was a pretty relatively positive experience. Yes, it was painful. Yes, there were some scary parts. Yes, it was not all, you know, super easy, but at the end of the day, you know, you are bringing a child, a human being into this world, so it's not going to be all sunshine and roses. But I will say that watching positive birth stories before I gave birth really eased my anxiety about it. Also, before we do get into it, I really quickly want to say I have been still posting like life routines and stories and tips and experience and all kind of stuff on my TikTok, my Instagram, and I recently started uploading all those to YouTube Shorts as well. Okay, my birth story. So my due date was July 13th. I gave birth on July 11th, and my water broke on July 10th at 10 p.m. So I'll get to all of that, but just to backtrack a little bit, a few days before my water actually broke, I'd say is when I started to have like early labor symptoms where I was feeling very mild cramping. I have always been somebody who got pretty severe period cramps. I did not, that I noticed, lose my mucus plug. I know that's like not a fun word to say, but I am wondering that maybe one night when I went to the bathroom, I may have lost it and I just didn't even realize, because I think like the day or 2 days before or something, I remember seeing some spotting down there and I was like, oh, is this a sign? But like, I don't think that I lost that. But I'd say that the biggest sign that I was definitely like things were happening is that it felt like I was on my period. And that week it worked out that my mother-in-law, my brother-in-law, my husband's brother, and his wife, my sister-in-law, were all staying with us with their daughter, who is 2 years old. So helpful between like when I was in labor and then after labor, and when we came home with him, they were still there for a little bit, which was unbelievably helpful. So July 10th, the day that my water actually broke, it didn't happen until 10 o'clock at night, but that throughout that entire day, I was exceptionally exhausted. Like first trimester pregnancy tired, where I did not feel like I could get off the couch. Starting, like the crampiness was starting to get more intense, nothing compared to like the full-on contractions I had later, but in terms of like, I felt like I was on my period. And so we were actually all gonna go visit Tim at work that day. And I was like, I'm sorry guys, I do not have the energy. But then later that evening, they were like, all right, let's go out to dinner. Everybody was gonna go to hibachi. And I remember kind of questioning if I was even gonna join them for that. But I was like, all right, you know what? I am hungry. I have to eat. And I've just been sitting around. Maybe it'll be good to get my butt up and go get something to eat. So we went, and that entire dinner, like this is where I really started to feel like I had a heavy period. And again, I am used to pretty severe period cramps, so I'm sure that's part of the reason that I wasn't as, you know, alarmed by them or like feeling like, all right, we probably should go to the hospital. But we had dinner. I feel like I didn't even eat that much. Like I was not that hungry because I was just not feeling good physically. Fast forward, this is like 9:55. Tim and I are in bed. We had literally just turned the lights out, like 5 minutes before. I'm lying in bed and all of a sudden I just feel, and it didn't hurt, but like this pop down there and then a gush of a ton of water. Like there was no mistaking this for anything other than my water broke. And I just remember my eyes opened wide and I was like, Tim? And you know how I feel like guys just fall asleep so darn fast. It takes me forever to fall asleep, but he's out in 2 seconds. So he's like kind of waking up like, what'd you say? And I was like, I think my water just broke. So then I shoot up and we like look at the covers and he's like, oh my gosh, not like fully leaking still, because I think the majority of it all came out in that like one gush. But I got my butt up and I was like, I'm gonna go sit on the toilet. Sitting on the toilet, and this is where the contractions really started to ramp up. Like within 5 minutes of my water breaking, I remember sitting there and I got the first feeling of like what a real intense contraction was. Mom and my sister-in-law came upstairs and they were sitting in the bathroom with me, like just kind of comforting me. I was like, not like on the outside freaking out, but on the inside I was freaking out. I was like, oh my gosh, this is real, this is happening. Tim and his brother were starting to get the car packed. Obviously I already had like my hospital bag, which I did also post a what's in my hospital bag on YouTube Shorts, so I'll have that linked below. So they were like getting the car ready and everything. Chris had a really good idea, my brother-in-law, where he took a like a towel and put it in a garbage bag and then put that on the front seat. That way, if I was going to be leaking anymore, it wouldn't get on the seat. So just a little tip. So they're getting the car ready. I'm sitting on the toilet and I was timing my contractions, because at this point I'm like, these are definitely like what I'm feeling are 1000% contractions. On a normal day with like average traffic, we're like an hour away from the hospital. So I knew that I wanted to, like, whenever it was time to go to the hospital, leave sooner rather than later. And my doctor had told me that once my contractions are lasting a minute and at least every 5 minutes, that's when we should pack up and go to the hospital. So I was timing them, and when I started to realize that they were coming in at like every 3.5 to 4.5 minutes, and they were lasting like a minute to a minute and a half each, I remember being very freaked out. So the drive to the hospital was not actually as bad as I thought, because of the time. It was like 10:30, I'd say, by the time we actually left. There was like no traffic on the highway. We ended up getting there in like 45 minutes, which was awesome. On the car ride, the contractions really again started to like ramp up to another level. And that's when I started to not be able to talk through the contraction. How I would describe a contraction. I know many people describe it in different ways. Some can get them in their back, their sides, their whole stomach. For me, it really was just like where a normal period cramp is. But I would say that once after my water broke, when they really were becoming more intense, it wasn't as much of a period cramp anymore, because I'd say for me those are more dull. It was like a sharp Charlie horse in my abdomen. The way that my OB explained it, and she was so correct in this, is it was like a wave. I'd start to feel it and I'm like, oh, it's coming on, and then it would like progressively get worse, reach a peak, and then start to go down. So when they say like the contraction lasts a minute and a half, right? You're not at like that top pain for the entire minute and a half. It's like slowly going up, you hit the peak, and then you start to feel, even though it's hurting on the way down, it's still like a bit of relief because you know that it's ending. So I think that also helped. And of course the fact that I had breaks in between the contractions. Now we got to the hospital, and I know that this is gonna sound so crazy, and in the moment I probably never would have thought this, but like looking back, I think very fondly of that time. Like I remember getting out of the car, and I at this point, like I couldn't even walk through the contractions, so I like was feeling one, and I remember holding on to Tim's truck on the side, and he's gathering the bags and getting everything out of the truck so we can head inside. And then it ended and we walked into the hospital. It was such like a surreal moment, because I remember walking in, there were like the guards and people sitting there, and they can tell obviously like I'm in there to give birth, and they're like, congratulations, congrats, good luck, and I'm like, thank you. And then the wheelchair came and he wheeled me upstairs. I had like 1 or 2 contractions I think during that ride, so I'm really glad that we got the wheelchair. When they wheeled me into the unit, and he was like, okay, you can get up now, and I kind of stood up, and then I started getting another contraction, and I remember like thinking in my mind, oh, I need to sit back down, but then I look back and he's already wheeling it away, and I'm like, alrighty. So I'm like leaning over the nurse's table thing. I remember saying like, I'm not too early to come in, right? I don't know why I thought they were going to turn me away, but I was just so nervous in the moment. They bring me into the room and the first thing I said was, when can I get the epidural? And she was like, well, we typically like for you to wait until you're at least 3 or 4 centimeters just to like prevent it from slowing anything down. So we'll have the doctor come in, she'll check you. I was so excited, because the OB who was on call that night is the OB that I had most of my appointments with, and I really liked her. She's actually the same OB who delivered one of my best friends. And so she comes in, she checks me, and I remember she was like, wow, you are 5 centimeters. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense why this hurts so much. When you get to 10 centimeters, that's when you're ready to actually push. So she said I was 5 centimeters and then 90% face, 9 something. Basically, she's like, you're well on your way to active labor, so we can get you the epidural if you want one. And I was like, yes, I do want one. Now at that point, it still took me like, I'd say an hour-ish to actually get the epidural, because they have to first take your blood work and then wait for the results to come back, and then wait for the anesthesiologist to like be ready to come in. So I'd say, actually, I have a timestamp. So based on these timestamps, At 10:09 p.m., I took this video where I was sitting on the toilet at home. And then 11:36 p.m., I took this video of my labor comb where I was sitting in the hospital waiting room waiting to be brought upstairs. So this was 12:01 a.m. I was all hooked up with them monitoring my belly. I was still getting contractions at this point, or I mean, I was still feeling the contractions. I didn't have an epidural yet. This was me during one. I asked him to take a photo of me, and then of course I immediately started contraction. So this is 12:30 a.m. I remember the nurse was bringing me a ball. I was going to try bouncing on it to help with contractions. That did not help me personally. That like made the contraction worse. I had to stand back up. And then after that, it jumps to 2:51 a.m. when I was actually just about to start pushing, but I'll get to that in a sec. So I must have gotten the epidural by like 1 a.m. I had the epidural in me, I would say. Getting the epidural really was not that bad at all. And it was very, very worth it in my opinion. I mean, I know everybody has their own, like if they want an epidural, if they don't, I pretty much, before I even gave birth, like knew that I wanted an epidural. That was always kind of going to be part of my plan. I know if I couldn't get it for any reason, I would have gotten through it, but I'm very grateful that I was able to. I was also grateful that they let Tim stay with me in the room. I know a lot of people I've talked to at different hospitals have said that your spouse has to leave the room when they do the epidural, which I don't fully know why, but for me, he was able to stay. So he was holding my hand, and then they had me like sit like this, kind of bent over. First they put in like the numbing needle, and that was like just a little sting. And then she went in with the epidural needle. And I guess the first time she did it, I did kind of like jolt forward a little bit. And I just remember her saying like, oh no, we can't have that. So, and then she was like, let me numb you up a little bit more. So she numbed me. And then the second time I was able to stay still. It was a lot of pressure. I'm not gonna lie. Like I felt pressure, but I was able to stay still and kind of in my mind be like, Kat, this is important for you. So she got the epidural needle in, and then I'd say within like 20 minutes, my right side was completely numb. Like I was not feeling anything. I was feeling great. However, my left side, I was still feeling slight contractions. It was nowhere near as bad as it was, but I could feel it, and they did still hurt. And I remember being nervous, like, oh my gosh, did it not work? And she was like, no, let's just try flipping you to like make sure that the medicine or whatever it is kind of like gets to both sides. So that worked. And then another 20 minutes later, from here down, I was numb. I was feeling great. I could still feel the pressure, but no pain at all. So once the epidural started working, she was like, all right, now you guys can just rest. And she hadn't checked me again at this point, but around midnight when I was checked, I was 5 centimeters. So they're like, it's going to be a while. Just take a little nap, get some rest, and then we'll come back in a little bit to check you. So we both fell asleep for a little bit. This had to have been like 1:30 a.m. or something. And now we can go back to our videos. This was right after I'd woken up from my nap, 2:51 a.m. I was filming myself, and then Tim he was sleeping on the couch or trying to sleep on the couch. Before I took my nap, I did ask for one of those peanuts. So I fell asleep with the peanut in between my legs on my side, which I assume must have helped because I remember lying there, and I was like 2 minutes after I took that video, I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, I feel like I need to go to the bathroom again, like number 2. I know they say that that's the feeling when you have to push, that's what it'll feel like, but I was like, it's only been a couple hours, and the doctor told me like it was probably going to be a while until I, was ready to push. So I kind of tried to fall back asleep, but then I was like, no, I still, like, I couldn't shake the feeling of like something's down there, like I feel pressure. So I called the nurse, she stuck her hand in, and then her face was like, oh my gosh, I don't feel your cervix, like you're ready to push. Even she was surprised. She was like, wow, that happened really, really fast, especially like having the epidural and everything. So Tim got up, and then she was kind of like getting me situated and stuff. She had me put my legs up. Tim was on my left side, the nurse was on my right side, and she's like, all right, I'll tell you when you should start pushing based off the contractions. So we did the first couple pushes, and she was like, you're doing great. This is definitely then what felt like the longer part of this entire process was pushing. I was pushing for like 4 hours. I started at 3:15 a.m. and he was born at 7:38 a.m. So that was quite the long process. At first they were like, you're doing great, but then I think it was a combination of just how unbelievably exhausted I was. And obviously it's difficult to push out a baby. And fun fact, he came out at 9 pounds. So he was a big guy. The first hour or so, I still had that excitement, those, with like adrenaline of like, okay, we're doing this, we're pushing. She was moving me around into some different positions, which I didn't think with an epidural. Like I thought the only position I could do was on my back, but she actually got this like rod that that she put at the front of the bed, and then her and Tim kind of helped move me up. So I was leaning over the rod and pushing downwards, which again, I didn't think that I'd be able to do that if I had an epidural, but I was able to. So if you like, I highly recommend you ask about that too if you're in a similar situation. For a little bit, I had Tim playing Taylor Swift. That was like going to be my labor playlist or my labor music, but then I just remember feeling like way too overstimulated, and I was like, nope. I did throw up a handful of times throughout labor, and I would say the number one thing that helped me with that was the little mini fan that I got. While I did throw up a handful of times, I think I would have thrown up way more if I did not have that fan. When I would get really crazy nauseous, Tim would put it on my face and it would just like kind of melt away that severe nauseous feeling. But I did throw up a few times, but it was fine. You know, you get over it. And then I remember for a period of time I was pushing with my eyes closed because I was just so exhausted. Like I felt like I had nothing in me. And I remember with my eyes closed being like, I'm awake, I'm still pushing, I can hear you, but I'm just closing my eyes. It got to the point where I think Tim could just see I had nothing in me, and he was like, listen, can we just take a little bit of a break? Will that slow things down, or is that okay? And the nurse was like, no, totally, like take a little bit, take some time to sleep. So we took like 30 minutes to sleep, and then I woke back up, and that definitely helped a ton. We were pushing for like another maybe 20-30 minutes, but still I wasn't making like a crazy progress. And she brought the OB in, and she kind of looked at me and she's like, listen, you've been pushing, I think it was like 3.5 hours or something at that point. Typically at this point is when we would start to talk about alternative options like a C-section or bringing out the vacuum. And I was like, totally get that, but like, can I please just like, I feel like I'm getting close. Like I just took this nap, so I have a little bit more energy. Like I'd really like to keep pushing. And she was like, of course, I'm not trying to push you into anything. I just want you to know that like at some point we will have to talk about those things. So we kept pushing, and then maybe like another 30 minutes later, she went to check me again. And at this point she was like, all right, you were too far along for a C-section. He had dropped pretty low. However, she wanted to talk about the vacuum, which is basically this tool that they stick in there and it like vacuum sucks, I guess, for lack of a better way to say it. I don't know the medical, like the official term. I've talked to moms who have had incredible experiences with that. But if at all possible, I wanted to avoid that. So I was like, can we just keep pushing a little bit longer? And this was actually like the doctors, this was like 7 a.m. So they were about to do a shift change. It was like, I'll let you talk to your new, like the shift is about to change, but I'll let you talk to your new doctor to kind of like figure out what you guys want to do. And I was like, okay, thank you so much. She had been incredible. Both doctors that I got to work with, I'm so grateful for. So the new doctor came in at 7, and I just remember saying to her, like, can I please keep trying to push at least a little bit longer? Like I know I'm past the point of a C-section. I just want to try and do this before we add any other interventions. She was like, okay. Put on this like splash guard, which I remember thinking like, oh gosh, I feel like I'm in a movie, but also I get it's like obviously why they use it. And she repositioned me so that my legs, I think my legs were like a little higher at this point. I don't know, but I remember she moved me around a little bit, took some of the blankets that were on me off, and she was like, all right, let's do this. And so we were pushing a little bit more. Entire night is kind of a haze, but especially these last like 35 minutes feels like such a blur in my mind. I have like blurry visions of like snapshots of the night. But I'd say like, I don't know, it had to be like 6 or 7 nurses, maybe more, like came in the room and they were all cheering me on. They were like, you got this, keep going. And I just remember thinking like, at first I was like, who the heck are all these people and why are they in my room while I'm giving birth? But then it very quickly became incredibly motivating. There was this one girl right by my right side, and she was like, you got this. And I guess I kept doing this thing where I was like not breathing in between pushes. I was just like, just trying to push him out. I remember saying like, how much longer is this gonna take? And obviously they don't fully know. But this one nurse was like, breathe, make sure you breathe. It was just such a heightened, like very difficult, but also so incredible at the same time. I remember I was like gripping onto Tim's hand with one hand. I had my labor comb in the other, which was really helping. I wouldn't say that it hurt, maybe a little bit, but more of a dull pain just because of how much pressure there was. Like the pressure was very intense, but it wasn't anything like the contraction pains or anything like that. So the pressure was just building. It was getting more and more intense. But I remember the doctor being like, you're so close. At one point she said to Tim, like, look, Dad, you can see the head. And he looked and he's like, Kat, he's right there. He's literally right there. And then she was like, do you want to see? I think actually now I'm kind of forgetting. I'm pretty sure they showed me a mirror. I can't actually remember. No, maybe they didn't show me, but I know they had me feel. I actually cannot remember even if they gave a mirror to show me, but I do know that that the doctor took my hand and like put my hand on his head and was like, he's right there. That really helped to like, let's get him out. And then at 7:38 a.m. on July 11th, he was born, and it was just like that feeling when the doctor took him out and like held him up and put him on my chest was the most surreal thing I have ever experienced. I guess I had like a shorter umbilical cord, so when she first put him down, he could only be on my stomach, and I was like, oh my God, oh my gosh. And then she said to Tim, like, Dad, do you want to cut the umbilical cord? So he cut the umbilical cord, which was really cool. And then she was able to put him like all the way up onto my chest. It was just the most surreal thing. And then the doctor was like, let's get a family photo. So you could see this photo. I feel like you could just see how drained but like happy at the same time Tim and I's faces are. But this was like over 24 hours. We had both been awake for like over 24 hours at this point. So we were just like so exhausted. So like I said, there were a lot of really tough parts in this. And I will say that the number one thing that helped me throughout all of labor and like the pushing and the contractions and everything was just thinking about that moment when he was finally on my chest and how worth it all of this was going to be. So when that finally happened, it was just the most incredible thing that I've ever experienced in my entire life. It'll probably be a different video, but I could definitely talk about like my experience at the hospital afterwards and like what postpartum life has been like since and everything. But this was like my labor and delivery story. Now, in light of the fact that Louie will probably be waking up any moment now because he's been taking a nice nap, and I want to be able to actually end this off, I think we're going to end this video for now. But thank you so much for watching. If you watch until this part, comment a green heart, and I would love to know any other videos, any like specific video requests that you have or recommendations. I definitely will be doing more like cleaning videos again, and mom life videos and routine videos, and probably some videos on like my experience of postpartum life and tips and mom stuff. I don't know, but if there's anything like specific that you want, I'd love to know. Maybe I'll do like a Q&A at some point. So if you have any questions, let me know those as well. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Love you, bye.